Great to see all the panelists prepared with their notes and everything. So,
we do our homework.
Yeah. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here again this year. I'm Panos Katsambas. I'm a partner with the law firm of Reed Smith, based in London, and it's a privilege to be moderating once again the panel on the international investor perspective in Greece, with a bit of a different spin this year, because I think the opportunity landscape and the experiences are very much on the positive side, as we have heard throughout the day. And very interestingly and happily, it's the first time I've done this panel in many years where we're not talking about non-performing loans, distressed and special situations. No offense to anybody investing in those asset classes, but it's rather refreshing to have more productive, let's say, panelists in terms of return on investment and investing further in Greece. With that, I will ask each members of the panel to briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll get going to meet our timeline. Kostas, you want to start?
Sure. My name is Kostas Mallios. I'm a corporate vice president at Applied Materials. We're the world's largest portfolio of wafer fab equipment manufacturing, tools, and so forth. I spent all my career in tech, Microsoft, and other companies. Great to be here with you.
Hi everyone, Alexandros. I'm a managing partner and head of investment banking at AXIA Ventures Group, one of the largest independent investment banking boutiques in Greece, and soon to be part of the Alpha Bank Group. I'm very pleased to be here for, I think it's probably my 20th time on Capital Link, so I've missed a few, but not too many.
Aziz Francis, I'm the founder of Brook Capital. We're a private equity firm focusing on real estate, investing in Greece extensively in the last 8 years.
Hello, everyone. James Christopoulos, born in Athens, Greece, but have been here long enough to sound very American. I'm a partner at CVC, which is a very global firm with over 30 offices, including my favorite one, which is in Athens, Greece. I'm based here, but I've been very involved with our investments in Greece, which I'm sure we'll talk to.
Hi, I'm Mehos. I'm managing director at U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, which is part of the U.S. government and acts as a development finance, supporting private sector investment in countries around the world. My area focuses on infrastructure and critical minerals investments, but I've also led all of DFC's activities in Greece.
Fantastic. As you can hear, we have a very diverse panel covering wide range of economic activity, from tech and VC to investment banking advisory, real estate, U.S. governmental support, and more traditional private equity. So a lot of ground to cover. And with that, we'll start. I will ask Alex to just give us an overview of the most recent market trends, what worked through 2025, and a bit of an overview of the current landscape.
Sure. Thank you, Pano, and I'll try to keep it short since you're standing there without a seat. So very briefly, I think 25 was quite unique in terms of transaction activity in Greece, not just because of the volume, but because of the breadth and different types of transactions that happened. We had Greek companies listing abroad. We had international strategic players investing in Greece, and both strategics and financial sponsors. We had sponsor exits. We had sponsor investments. We had a lot of debt issuance, both Eurobonds and local market bond issuances. So it was one of those times in Greek history, recent Greek history, where you saw a lot of different products working in the market. And that applied across many different sectors. I mean, just in this panel, we have representation from tech, from hospitality, from healthcare, from a number of different industries that were represented. So I think that's a testament to what we've been hearing all day about the stability of Greece, the prospects of Greece, about the work that's been done so far, both from the government and the corporate world, and the investor world for that matter. And I think it sets the stage and it sets the basis for many more things to come in the next few years. In terms of what lies ahead, I don't expect the same breadth necessarily of activity. I think people have to be very mindful of where they invest in and potential pitfalls. Not every company is ready for an investment or a transaction. Not every transaction is fit, or every transaction type is fit for every company. So we have to be very careful, and that's part of our job as advisors, to advise people in terms of what makes sense for each company, what type of transaction, or whether they need to do other things before they become transactional. So without getting into too many specifics and boring the people that have been here all day, I'd say in summary that there are very good prospects and very good tailwinds going into 2026 and beyond, but we have to be careful to maintain that and build the momentum, continue building the momentum. It takes a long time to build it. It's very easy to destroy it. So we have to be very mindful of what we put out in the market and how we advise our existing and prospective clients.
And just in one word, hottest sector for 2026?
I think we'll talk about that next year, but I think we do see a lot of activity in the energy, the infrastructure side of the spectrum. Hospitality remains quite active. There's a few emerging trends, pharma, defense, tech, smaller opportunities for the most part, but we see some opportunities there as well. So I think there's a lot of trends in terms of industry allocation. In terms of product, I would expect to see more M&A activity and probably more strategics playing a role, whether it's investments into the country or creating exits for a lot of financial sponsors that have been in the country for some time. Hopefully we'll see more ECM activity. We heard in the morning that that's one of the laggards probably in terms of what's happening in Greece, but I think that's going to probably take a little bit longer, and we're going to have to wait and see also the effect of the Euronext transaction before we see a substantial pickup in that activity.
Thank you, Alex. James, turning it over to you. I mean, you guys have been pioneers in sort of the private equity investment in Greece, entering the market in a big way at a time where few were attempting deals of the nature you did, and you invest across a number of sectors: food and beverage, insurance, healthcare, tech, and so forth. And by now, you've done also some very spectacular exits. How are you positioned now, and where do you see the opportunities in the current environment?
So let's see. So yes, we're fortunate to now be 8+ years into our journey of investing actively in Greece, and our experience has been quite positive, and it is now translating, as you said, Panos, to some exits, partial or full exits, which has been great to see sort of the full life cycle of investments. So maybe we're just bullish and optimistic by nature, but we still think there's tremendous opportunities across the economy. We're active in most sectors, frankly, and so on the one hand, through the portfolio of our existing investments, we're looking to keep expanding them and reinvesting, doubling down through acquisitions or through new platform investments as well. But certainly, just to echo Alex's comments, there's plenty of growth areas right now that we're also tracking and following. Energy clearly has a little bit more of the zeitgeist recently in the region. Defense is unfortunately become a bigger area of focus in the intersection, obviously, with technology. And I would say technology has just been a great story for the country the last couple of years, and we've seen that both from an investor perspective, but also how it's permeated the businesses that we're partnering with. So it mirrors in some respects what we've observed in society. We've talked before about the digitalization from the government perspective. We've seen that in our businesses, and so we think that's a theme even in old economy businesses, but certainly with a thriving new tech sector as well. So I'd highlight those as probably top of mind.
Oh, great. I'll use the technology to pass on to Kostas, but before doing so, what do you say are the two things that have worked best in this 8-year journey that you've been most impressed with, and how your experience in Greece has been? For you, James, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I guess I would say, listen, we've invested in technology directly in a business called Scrooge, and that faces the consumer segment. And so that's always been perhaps at the forefront of tech adoption and expansion. And so that's been a very positive experience so far. I think partly related to that and the importance of technology, I guess building off of my earlier comments and addressing your question too, is it allows what is ultimately a relatively small domestic market to grow internationally and to be an enabler to expand beyond the borders. And that's both from accessing markets as well as accessing talent and people as well. So I think from our perspective, the definition of technology and investment is pretty broad in the end of the day.
Thank you, Kostas. I mean, speaking about technology, digitization of the Greek state, opportunities in tech, growing VC sector in Greece, how do you see it from the perspective of an international investor in technology, working with international companies active in the space? Give us your perspective, and how do you see Greece positioned in the global tech market today?
Yeah, I get involved doing a venture capital fund in about 2014 with Piraeus Bank. And back then, it's a very, very different story. The founders thought we were handing out grants rather than venture funding and so forth. If you look at Greece today, you have a very different marketplace, both for technology startups, but also just for technology companies in general. I think Greece has always been a peripheral market. Now I think it's mostly a sustainable, innovation-based marketplace. If you look at the stability that has been in the government lately, I think it's been inspiring. And if you need anything for investor returns, you need stability. The other thing that you have going for Greece right now is momentum. You have a tremendous amount of momentum. You have multiple funds that are now funding companies, whereas in 2014, I think we were the first seed fund, actually co-funded by the EIF. And so Greece in general has a great cost to innovation ratio. In other words, you can come up with great technology, very, very cheap, which is very attractive to global internationals. I've got a lot of experience with this. We've brought multiple investors, which I'll talk about later. You've got a cultural bias toward problem solving. I used to think this was a liability. The Greek creativity was a bad thing. It's actually a great thing when you're building technology startups, because you start with a high value problem and you just keep going at it until you're done. The R&D incentives and the digital governance, as was mentioned earlier, I mean, I was awestruck in the middle of COVID when gov.gr came up and just really blew my mind. It is now a world-class platform. The things you can do on that government platform, I think, is an example for most countries, including this one, of what's possible in terms of citizen self-service. I have a lot of examples of companies that I've been involved with that have been purchased. Most recently in October through a commercial arrangement with Qualcomm. Qualcomm has now entered the country. Qualcomm is a large semiconductor design seller. It's a $50 billion a year company. 4 years before that, Applied came to Greece. We purchased a company called Think Silicon. We sold 104 million GPUs in 4 years, which frankly was pretty impressive. I remember giving the Prime Minister a wafer which was 100% designed GPU chips heading toward the market. And the customers are, all the Garmins, all the Fitbits, all the Oppos, all the Xiaomis, all the Huawei watches were using a Greek GPU design, which is something that we can all be proud of. InnoEdX was a company we sold to Samsung that I was a part of. That company brought an R&D center to Greece. I just found out at lunch the other day that JP Morgan is an innovation center in Greece, one of 3, which I did not even know of. So if you ask me, I'm an optimist about Greece. I can keep giving you examples all day. Soon, I'm helping another company sell to another listed U.S. company from Greece. That could probably be announced in about 3 months. So I'm an optimist. I think Greece is on a roll. There's a tremendous ecosystem that has been built up, that has been brought together by investors, really willing, positive investors, sophisticated investors, by organizations like Endeavor, which have done just an unbelievable job. I mean, that organization in Greece is world-class today and anytime I can foresee in the future. You have founders that are second-time founders that are now angel investors that are coming back and starting other companies that are experienced, that are positive, that have a network. And just in general, you have a government that's frankly listening. We had a listening session today at noon which was also, I think, another good example of what we can do if we bring all the pieces together, acting in collaboration.
Thank you. It was also phenomenal to hear about the government initiative with the rebrain session that they had yesterday. Really, really impressive. But let me ask you, besides the positives, if you were to say the two things that are missing in your experience from, getting even to further success, what are those missing links that Greece doesn't have, so that we can, move to the next level and compete more efficiently internationally?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. It's something I think a lot about. I think that Greece is a pilot market. We're a very small, compact country where a lot of the people that need to know each other. And there's still, we've been a seafaring nation for centuries, if not thousands of years. So it's amazing to me how they stick to the borders. Now, of course, there's exceptions. I just pointed out some of. But I think in general, we need to just be able to absorb global funding, seek global funding, toot our horn a little bit in terms of what we do as a country, as a small, compact country. I think there's a lot to be proud of. We need to create an awareness campaign that I saw a lot of this weekend, but other than this weekend, it's really difficult. I've had to personally meet with boards of the companies I've worked for to convince them that Greece is a safe area to invest in. It's a safe, great place to put your R&D organization in. And remember that when you fund R&D in a country, what you're funding is the future of that country. You're doing tech transfer. And that tech transfer, I think, is critical for Greece to go forward. I mentioned repeat founders. That is a brain trust that I think is underestimated. That kind of positive flywheel, I think, is something that we will see the fruits of in 10, 20 years. And we need to play in bigger markets. We need to play in AI a lot more. We need to play in robotics a lot more. There is a new, I'll call it a tsunami of technology innovation that's coming worldwide. One of the questions I asked the minister earlier is, what are we doing about it? How are we preparing our own companies? How are we preparing our startups to take advantage of all this, sea change in automation that is coming? Because AI and robotics is all about automation, make no mistake about it, which also means cost cutting. So what are we doing to prepare our own companies within the country? How are we going to compete against global corporations that will be coming to Greece as a market? How will we partner with them over the long term so that we can actually reap the fruits of that transition rather than have another, S-curve that basically dumps out and we have to start from scratch? And I think we need to be involved in more industrial partnerships as a country. In other words, our startups, our established companies have a lot to offer international companies that are looking to de-risk their investments in R&D. And so we need to actually seek those partnerships out really proactively. And we need to do a lot more of that. Last but not least, we need really good incentive programs, and I think the Greek government is working towards that, but we need more of that. We need to lower the the corporate tax rate from 22% even lower. We need to provide tax holidays, for super talented individuals that want to go to Greece. That are not just Greeks repatriating, but are Americans, are Ukrainians, are Indians, are Chinese. We need to be very selective, and I think we need to incentivize the talent to be in Greece to create value.
Thank you, Kostas. Certainly some really amazing ideas and food for thought for all of us. But I'll slightly shift gears and go to the more traditional bricks and mortar and turn it over to Aziz, who, talking about pioneers, take us through a bit of your journey and how you started a real estate investment firm in Greece and kind of the things that have worked pretty well and where you are today in that journey.
Well, first let me say it's amazing and very inspiring to be on this panel with a lot of positivity, and today as well. To me, one of the biggest elements of investing in a jurisdiction is to be surrounded by this animal spirit, and you feel that has come back in a very strong way in the last 2 years, and since COVID really, but the last 2 years across the board in Greece. And I think that's the foundation of, any environment where you want to make money. So I think it's great to see and feel. We're seeing it in our day-to-day investments, and 5 years ago that wasn't the case, and it was very challenging to convince people that you can make money in Greece. I think today everyone agrees that Greece has a great story ahead of it. A lot of people think of Greece as a recovery story, and it's not. I think the recovery has happened on many levels. I think today Greece is on a very solid track to be a great growth story. It's a big beneficiary of a lot of the events that happened post-COVID. And, as a firm, my background is in distressed investing, so obviously Greece was a destination to us to deploy capital as a provider of capital in dislocated markets. But today, I think it's one of the safest places to make money in Europe. From a very macro point of view, panels shouldn't be why do you invest in Greece? It should be why not to invest in Greece. I can list 100 reasons when I look at Greece on a comparative basis to many other bigger, larger European countries where, from a macro point of view, bottom-up point of view, and most importantly, valuation point of view, Greece today is one of the cheapest jurisdictions with the healthiest balance sheet and probably one of the best risk-reward environments in Europe. So, that's where we are. I mean, as a firm, we started deploying in real estate and we did a bit of credit, but we ended up kind of evolving from acquiring portfolios from banks to today we are, probably outside of Lambda, the largest investor in Ellenikon. We're developing residential in Athens. We're buying hotels. I think Greece, again, people think about it as a small market or contained, but in reality, when you look at hospitality, it punches way above its size. I mean, hospitality is a massive market, and in Greece, in terms of size and depth, and it competes with Italy, with Portugal, maybe a bit less than Spain and France in terms of size, but it's in that category. So we're really going where there is a natural strength for Greece in terms of, hospitality and living, and we're focusing on that the next few years.
Well, let me ask you on that, because last week in London at the Morgan Stanley Athens Stock Exchange conference, Prime Minister Mitsotakis mentioned that one of his goals is to turn Greece as kind of the hospitality champion in Europe and become the prime number one destination for high-end hospitality. How achievable do you see that goal, and what more needs to be done to help us get there?
Look, I mean, a lot has to be done. High-end hospitality is not your hotel, it's the whole ecosystem. When you talk about high-end, you talk about infrastructure and a number of other things that come with it. So it's not purely building, nice new properties. But the reality is Greece has an amazing edge versus many other destinations to create the high-end product. So we're big believers that trend has already started maybe in the last 6 years. You see probably Greece is one of the markets where there has been the highest number of conversions of hotels from 3-4 stars to 5 stars. So I think what is missing today, and this is a 10-year cycle, is the institutionalization of the product. Greece is still on the hospitality side massively dominated by small owners that have 1 or 2 properties. And, when you look at the other markets that are maybe 10 years ahead of it, you need to have an institutionalization of the hospitality sector that provides a platform to improve the product quality, and I think it's happening. We are definitely one of the players in that, but there's a lot of great players who have been very active in that segment in the last 5-6 years.
If I may, Panos, one comment to this, because I think I agree with Aziz what he said, but I think the benchmark, especially when we talk about high-end hospitality, but that permeates pretty much all of the investments, I think the benchmark is probably wrong here. It's not about being, converging to the European average or being the best in Europe. When you're talking about those types of products, you have to be globally competitive. The high-end tourist is not going to select Greece versus Italy. They have the whole world to select that. A tech investor can go anywhere in the world and invest. So when we're talking about the success of Greece, we have to put it on the right sort of benchmark and the right setting.
Let me add to your point. I think it's more than that. Even in lower end, I think the customer on hospitality side has become global. The family that comes to Greece in July, they go to the Caribbean, in the winter, or they go to Asia, and they see the products and they compare. So on every aspect of the spectrum of hospitality, Greece needs to be playing at and it has all the benefits, and it has the depth and the capacity and the know-how. I mean, again, obviously I'm a big believer, but the reality is Greece should be, and ECOS is a great example, should be leading the way, and it should be exporting concepts. I think, there should be 10 ECOS in the world that are popping up in many jurisdictions that were built and created in Greece as brands. I think that's the future, and you're going to see that more and more Greek brands going outside of Greece into more Asian and European countries.
Thank you. Harry, let's turn it over to you and see in all these great stories and vision how the US government through the DFC program can support, and why don't you start by giving us a bit more detail on the remit of the DFC, and you've already been involved in the shipyards project in Greece, but kind of the audience here and other market participants, how can they interact with the DFC organization, and what's your agenda going forward?
Sure.
A loaded question, but
I know.
You've been patient.
DFC was formed in 2019. It was an outgrowth of the predecessor organization called Overseas Private Investment Corporation, which was around for over 50 years separately, and their mission was to mobilize private sector investment in emerging markets. I think it was recognized by Congress and administration that the U.S. needed more capabilities to advance its strategic interests around the world and compete more against countries like China. And so DFC was formed. It gave us more product capabilities. We principally would have, before it just had debt and insurance, but now we have equity, direct equity capabilities, which I think has been very important, as well as political risk insurance. And they increased our capacity, the overall portfolio limit for investments, to $60 billion, which gives us much more capabilities in terms of ticket size. We can do, based on specific projects, theoretically up to $1 billion, or based on how important and strategic and how we assess the investment from a return standpoint. We analyze it very much like a private sector investor would. Want to make sure that we get our paid back or return on our investment. I think the two goals are really that from a development standpoint, it has a strong development benefit in the country, and increasingly so that it, and it's always been the case, but I think it's increasingly important that it shows that it's strategically aligned with the United States interests, both from a foreign policy, national security standpoint, and that's why right now, and over the last several years, we've been very, very excited about the strength of the relationship between U.S. and Greece, and I think this goes throughout the administration. Because Greece is more of a higher income country than DFC's traditional focus. Up till now, we've been limited to, in a country like Greece, to energy or energy infrastructure investments. However, and this is as recently as last night, I think Congress has just pushed forward its latest bill modernizing DFC, and it'll give us a lot more capabilities to invest in Greece outside of those sectors. So we're not going to be restricted to energy or energy infrastructure type investments. We could do things in the telecommunications side, critical minerals side, healthcare, or whatever, as long as we think that it's strategically aligned with U.S. interests.
And how would it work if somebody wanted to approach? Is it the market participant that approaches you, or do you sort of reach out to them, or can people just submit an application?
We don't have in some countries we have offices. We don't have, unfortunately, right now an office in Greece. We'd like to, maybe at some point, or I'd like to at some point, as we progress. But right now, I think it works like a normal, investment banking or relationship, where you can approach us if you have a business plan, needs for, investment, more capital investment that the U.S. could support. I mean, we're not meant to compete against private sector investment. It's actually the opposite. We're trying to encourage more private sector investment. So we look for investors to come alongside us, if possible. And, we look for areas where they're challenging, maybe challenging to be 100%, supported by the investment community without the U.S. government's involvement. The shipyard we did in Onyx and Elefsina shipyard 2 years ago, we've been very excited how that's turned out. It was, as many of you know, was a dormant shipyard, unfortunately, for many years, and it was going through a lot of financial distress. And I think it's remarkable how they've turned that around in a short period of time. When you go there and see the activity, and we've sent a lot of, I think just recently, I think the Secretary of Interior was there twice, and the Energy Secretary, and they're always very impressed about the progress that they've seen, and happy that DFC has been able to support that.
No, that is indeed a fantastic investment in a very critical sector for the Greek shipping ecosystem. Yeah, but great investments also require financing support from the bank. So, Alex, I'll turn it over to you because we've seen over the last couple of years, especially over the last year, say the Greek banks starting to become much more extrovert again. Whether by expanding in new sort of areas of activity, like buying AXIA, for example, congratulations, or expanding geographically as well. Where do you see the banking sector in supporting all this private investment, and how do you see the next moves in that respect?
Yeah, look, I think traditionally, historically, the Greek banking system in general has been there to support sound investments, especially once it sorted out its own issues during the crisis. It did become quite commercial and quite extrovert in terms of financing new opportunities. I think there's a lot more to be done in Greece. I think there's a lot of efficiency still to be brought into the system. I think that the Greek banks can also become more efficient in dealing with institutional capital in some respects and in some situations. But I think all of those things are kind of around the edges improvements. I think the Greek banks are in fact there to support solid investments. What is developing, and is developing quite nicely and quite strongly, is also alternative tools to financing good investments. The Greek bond market, the Eurobond market, hopefully soon the equity capital markets are going to be there in much more depth to support good investments as well. For the banks themselves, I think it is important to look outside of their traditional areas of business. We heard in the banking panel, some of the banks are looking eastward. Other banks, they have reference shareholders that have a strong presence throughout Europe. Every bank has its own strategy on how to become more extroverted. And one thing that probably most people don't realize is that most Greek banks nowadays have participated and have financed projects throughout Europe and outside of Europe that have nothing to do with Greece at all. So they are becoming, not just Greek banks, they are becoming regional banks, they are becoming European banks. And as I said before, they have to be there to underwrite risk and take the right approach to it for projects within their geographical grasp, and that has to expand as much as possible. Obviously, I don't think it's fair or realistic to expect that any one of the four systemic banks are going to become global banks, but I think in the region around Greece, whether it's east or west, north or south, but a radius around Greece, the Greek banks can play a leading role. They have the health, they have the balance sheet, they have the know-how. They have, good tailwinds, as we said before. The government and the politics have been supportive. They have to continue being supportive, not just stay out of the way of private investment, but also help materialize it. But I think Minister Mehos is going to talk a lot more about it and much more eloquently than I can. But in short, I think that looking forward, a couple of years, not too far into the future, we're going to go back to where the Greek banking system was a few years before the crisis, not just focus on Greece, being regional, each bank with its own strategy, but having a much wider footprint.
You've made my outline for the questions for next year, but it's definitely a fantastic transformation of the Greek banking system. But James, staying on the subject of the banks, can you give us a little bit your experience in terms of how they were able to finance your needs in acquisition, bolt-ons, and so forth, and how do you compare that when, kind of in the US and European market, for the most part, transaction financing has been dominated by private credit lenders, which is a product we haven't really seen as much in Greece yet.
Yeah, no, I was nodding along a lot with Alex's comments, and it's funny for someone who splits my time between New York and Athens. A lot of people chuckle when I tell them we're able to borrow in Greece at a much lower rate than here in the US for businesses of similar profile. So in some respects, and maybe somewhat surprisingly, it's almost a comparative advantage that we have because the banking sector in Greece is quite healthy for all the reasons Alex mentioned, and the systemic banks in particular have been very commercial, and to their credit, I think creative and good commercial partners. So that certainly has been our experience. Obviously, it's critical to the private equity business model to have good financing available. Yes, are the Greek banks pushing the limits of the amount of leverage? No. It's not what we do as a firm either way, so it's not really impactful to us. But in terms of flexibility, terms, cost of debt, I think the Greek financing market is a very strong one. And yes, we do have, as a firm, access to financing alternatives across Europe that we could tap into. But for all of our investments in Greece, we've been using the local financing markets to make our investments.
Amazing. Aziz, our time is winding down, but I need to ask you to elaborate a little bit about your Ellinikon investment and approach and vision, because it's, I mean, we had a dedicated session on it, but it's, you know, we were preparing earlier and chatting about it, and it's fascinating to hear your perspective.
Yeah,
so I think the audience needs to hear your...
I know, but we don't have enough flats for everyone here, so everyone's going to want to buy a flat, you know, after I've finished. But look, where do I start? I mean, again, I think Odysseas was here discussing the project earlier, but I think I'm gonna take an outsider view on what's happening in Athens, because Ellinikon is truly a game changer for Athens. Rarely any capital in Europe or in the world has any project of that size being built on a tarmac. So this is a zero GDP area that's going to become 3 times the size of Monaco. That's going to come with its own, requirements, needs, activities, etc. So we took a view that we want to be part of that story from the get-go. We acquired, we started 2 projects, a mixed-use tower and another mini tower on the residential side. And we believe that Athens, we're betting on within Ellinikon, Athens and Greece, but especially Athens, becoming a major destination for secondary housing, secondary living, and European residents. I think what's going to happen, and it's already happening, the trends are clear. You have that in the US, all of New York is moving to Miami. You have a lot of the Dubai dynamics. People are looking, you have remote working, you have low tax jurisdiction, good living, quality of life, security, great culture. I mean, a lot of the fundamentals that are attracting, people who today, unlike 30 years ago, feel that, having 2 bases in their day-to-day life has become, a norm. And you're going to start seeing a lot of Europeans, whether it's Swiss, Germans, French, starting, buying secondary residences in Athens. And we're building the product for them to come, because I think you don't see them yet in mass because the product's not here. So Ellinikon was a strike of amazing luck for Athens, given the timing of the project, with all these mega global trends that are happening, that are unrelated to Greece, and they're just truly, coincidental with the strength that Athens proposes. And I keep saying, Athens is Miami meeting Rome, and you don't get that often. So, in 5 years, maybe Capital Link can have the event. It'll be a bit warmer. We'll do it in Ellinikon and with, the Miami beach of Europe. So
yeah, let's aim for that.
Yeah.
And we'll close with Costa. What does the AI model say for Greece in 5 years from now?
Oh God, you didn't actually put that on the list of questions. What does the AI model say? I think 5 years from now, I think Greece will be a much bigger success story than it is today. I think that we cannot sit around and wait for that to happen automatically. It's just not going to happen that way. You have a lot of people in this room You have a lot of people on this panel that have taken risks. I think there was a great point that Aziz pointed out earlier, which is this is a global marketplace. People have choice. They can choose to go to Greece. They can choose to go to 15 or 20 other locales, buy companies in other places, establish R&D centers, wherever that means for them. But I think it's important for us to stay very vigilant and to keep acting now. So I'm very bullish. I have some land near Leniko. You give me some great ideas. Thank you. But Greece is on the move. The momentum is in our favor. And I think all of you should work together and engage to make Greece an even better place to live, visit, cultivate, whatever we want to do there. And I personally have 2 daughters. I can't wait for them to see the Greece of the future because I'm very bullish about it, and I think everyone in here has a role to play in creating it.
Amazing. We will end with that bullish note, but thank you again for listening, and thank you for hosting.
By the way,
But where are you based?
please don't go. We have a thunderous closing. Costa, if you can check your phone, please.
Did it ring?
It didn't ring.
Oh.
I just sent to Kostas a picture of him being a panelist here in 2008, together with Eric Trump. So,
This is when I was at Microsoft.
Yeah, you were at
Thank you.
Microsoft. So,
Yeah.
But that shows exactly the caliber of the people on this panel and their commitment not only to Capital Link but to Greece above all, and the enduring exactly insight that you have really brought all these years to all of you. Thank you very much. And Panos, you have been the constant moderator.